Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's edition of Weekend Waypoints, a production of SEC Extra and D1Baseball.com. I'm your host, Joe Healy. We're going to go through this weekend's SEC action, a 4-game weekend, given that we have 6 of the 8 series starting on Thursday, 2 others starting on Friday. So a special Thursday edition of the show. Before we get into any of the previews, though, I have to remind you that this episode of Weekend Waypoints and every episode of Weekend Waypoints is brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors. Get ready for a new season of fishing fun with Academy Sports and Outdoors and reel in the best gear at low prices every day. Plus, Academy offers easy ways to shop and save time, like free 1-hour in-store or curbside pickup on academy.com orders. All right, you might wonder, hey, Joe, it says Friday on the backdrop there. Why do you have the Friday one? It's a good question. One is it's kind of like a Friday with 6 of the 8 series starting tonight on Thursday. It does feel a little bit like a Friday, but also I don't have a Thursday backdrop. I forgot to ask the people who make these things for me to do a Thursday one. I kind of forgot about the 2 weekends a year, this weekend and also the final week of the regular season that start on Thursday. So that's on me. So we're rolling with a Friday backdrop today. I think we'll be all right. All right, let's get to it. Another fun weekend, especially because the last couple of weeks we've gotten some intrigue with some teams that were in ruts starting to make a move. Some of the teams that we thought maybe were just about unbeatable, impenetrable, have wobbled a little bit, have taken on some losses. So I think we've got some more intrigue in the league as we move towards the second half of SEC play, which begins tonight. We're 5 series down, 5 series to go. Got some comments waiting here. Eric Simmons says, if Texas A&M goes 3-3 against Arkansas and Texas the next few weekends, I think that would be huge. Yeah, totally agree. Look, A&M's playing a lot better. They've got wins under their belt. They've won 2 series, swept last weekend and won the series against Tennessee before that. So that they're back on the horse, so to speak. But like, if you look at the back half of their schedule, if they're going to get into a regional, they're going to have earned it because there's no such thing as an easy or a difficult schedule in the SEC. They're all tough. It's just different degrees of tough. But what A&M has to finish the season is pretty brutal. So they're going to have to continue to earn it. So for all the work they've done, they've still got a lot in front of them. All right. First series on the docket today, Auburn at Texas. I recorded a podcast with Adam Cole of the Montgomery Advertiser that right about now actually is going live. So check that out. We talk about the Texas series a little bit, but mostly we just kind of talk about big picture stuff with Auburn and coming off that series sweep of LSU last weekend, and what it means, what's gone well for Auburn, where they might actually still have room to get better. That Butch Thompson has been clear about that he thinks his team still has a lot of room to grow. So that certainly would be huge for Auburn because they're pretty doggone good as it is. Can Auburn pitch as well as they have again? Last weekend they got not only great stuff from Sam Dutton, who's been so consistent all year, they got a good start from Cade Fisher, and they got some good work on Sunday too from Andreas Alvarez with 4 shutout innings. It wasn't dominant 4 shutout innings, but 4 shutout nonetheless. Can they get that kind of starting pitching again? That's going to be key. Their bullpen is actually quietly pretty deep. You may not realize that, but you look at it and they've got 6 or 7 guys they trust quite a bit there, and including a guy like Carson Myers that they tried to start last year. It just kind of went okay. It bounced around different roles. This year he's been kind of a long relief guy, and he's been excellent. So good bullpen there. And the same thing for Texas. Volantis, Flores, and Grubbs have been about as good as any trio in the country from a bullpen standpoint. So the key for Auburn is the same as it is against every team that's played Texas is, can you get their starters out of the game? And then more importantly, can you force them to burn their top bullpen guys early in the weekend? And I think Auburn's offense can. Doesn't mean they will, but I think they can, just not only when you consider how talented they are, but also the fact that they're a team that doesn't strike out a lot. They battle, they put together long at-bats. So the pitch counts for Texas pitchers, if Auburn is able to execute the way it has, are going to get elevated. It's just a matter of how early, how often, all of that kind of stuff. So that's a really, really intriguing series for me in Austin this weekend. I wrote about it as my series of the week. You can read that up on the site this morning. Happy Easter as well. It is Easter weekend. I don't know if I mentioned that. I mentioned that it was a 4-day week, but yes, Easter on Sunday. So happy Easter, everyone, to there. Garrett Douglas asks, excuse me, how many combined injections between Tennessee and UK this weekend? or will umps allow the shenanigans in softball like chirping? Yeah, I mean it's gonna be a chirpy series. Like these are two dugouts that have no issue getting into it, right? So I was there for the series last year, and it was in addition to being a really fun series on the field and perhaps the best series I saw all last season. In addition to that, it was intense. Like it was there was a lot of chirping, there was a lot of high emotion. I don't anticipate it being any different this weekend. Uh, but it's a good question. Not so much the ejections part, like, because I don't know. But the bigger question there is just how much do the umps impose themselves? How much do they let go? There's really no, unfortunately for umpires, they're in a tough spot. There's really no right answer there last year, or no right answer in that situation. Last year they kind of let it go, and everything turned out okay. But I also understand if they want to be a little more vigilant about that. So we'll just have to see. Scott says Simo had an epic series last year. He did. Yeah. Christian Moore last year in that series in Lexington was outstanding. And that was really, I mean, we knew what he was before that, but for like the casual audiences, the casual college baseball people that maybe aren't following us closely, that was when I think a lot of people woke up to how good he is and that he could be in that conversation with, Charlie Condon and Cags and that group among the best players in college baseball. So yeah, that to me is my biggest memory of that weekend is just that Christian Moore more or less put his team on the back. They didn't necessarily need him to, because the team played well in general, but Christian Moore did an outstanding job that weekend. Excuse me, got a little frog in my throat. Okay, let's move on to Bama at LSU. Bama's on its heels right now. It needs something to get moving in the right direction, but it's tough when you're going to Baton Rouge against an LSU team that's going to be motivated coming off of that series sweep they suffered at the hands of Auburn last weekend. So not exactly an ideal situation for Alabama to try to get back on the horse. On the LSU side, I'm not too worried about anything specific. I just think Auburn played well last weekend. It was one of those weekends that you see in SEC play where every team has a weekend where they play well, they just get beat, and then you start asking existential questions about the team, but really there's really nothing to get too bent out of shape about. It just kind of happens in this league. I think that was that weekend for LSU. I know they've lost a couple series, and so you're, if you're an LSU fan, I get why there might be a little bit of concern about, if they really are among that elite tier in the SEC. I still believe they are. But this series is a big opportunity. Obviously, it's home against an Alabama team that you're better than. Can you take advantage? And for Alabama, if they're going to, if they're going to have a result here, even get a win in this series, they're going to have to hit better. Like the offense has really gone quiet. You've got a couple guys that are Bonamolo's still hitting. Justin LeBron obviously is still hitting, but not at the clip they were early in the season. But then most everybody else has been pretty quiet in SEC play. So that's got to change. And then speaking of offenses getting going in SEC play, I'd kind of been I kind of really hadn't noticed that Jared Jones, really in SEC play, the power hasn't quite been there. Now he's a complete hitter. He's not just hitting for power. Power is also a little down in the SEC this year. That's a conversation I'm starting to have with some coaches and some other people around the sport, kind of asking questions about if they have theories as to why that is. No real consensus yet on that, but power is down, so maybe there's some of that is there as well. But obviously in an LSU lineup that doesn't have as much power as it has had in the past, Jared Jones is a key piece there to strike fear in the hearts of opposing pitchers with the ability to leave the park at any time. Obviously, he still has that ability. We just haven't seen it as often in SEC play. Excuse me, Georgia at Vanderbilt. I think the question that we've been asking about Georgia specifically, but in this series or any road series they have, is will the offense travel? But now, and that's always still going to be a thing, is how much does Georgia hit on the road versus at Foley Field? But I think now I'm actually more interested in, will the Vanderbilt lineup be able to score against a Georgia pitching staff that is starting to get some clarity? Now they still have some issues. I mean, look at the game on Friday of last weekend where it was a tight game late, and then Arkansas just poured it on against Georgia's bullpen, and some of the guys that they poured it on against were some of their top guys. Now some weren't as the game started to get away from them, but some were, and so they're not without their questions. But now they've got a rotation of Brian Curley. Colton Smith is back in the rotation. He was great last weekend. Leighton Finley pitched better last weekend. So suddenly, the Georgia pitching staff is rounding into form a little bit, and it's a Vanderbilt lineup that, for all the success they've had, and they've had plenty of it, you still kind of don't know what to expect offensively and against good pitching in particular. So yes, it will be interesting to see how the Georgia offense deals with being on the road. But I'm actually more interested in what does Vanderbilt do offensively, because I think that's with this series, especially being in Nashville, I think that's going to be a big determining factor here in this series is, will Vanderbilt's offense do enough to win the games? A&M and Arkansas. A&M is probably, we should consider well and truly back, however we define that, if they win this series. It's a little bit like the Bama LSU series, where catching Arkansas after they just lost a series against Georgia, probably not ideal for A&M, going into a hornet's nest in Fayetteville, but it is an opportunity for A&M. Like I said, it's a tough second half. If they're going to be a postseason team, they're going to have to win some series like this. And so that's kind of the stakes there. Arkansas played well last weekend against Georgia. Ultimately, they lost 2 one-run games, right? They mounted a comeback in game 2, lost it 7-6. I think it was 7-2 at one point. They clawed back in, couldn't quite finish it. And then in Sunday's game, they went 12 innings, and Georgia hit a walk-off solo homer that kind of just snuck out to center field. So I don't think there's really any shame there. One interesting note here, Gage Wood back in the rotation for Arkansas, Gabe Gackle out. Now, obviously, with Gage Wood having not pitched since the second weekend of the season, he's not going to be ready to come out and throw 100 pitches, but it does give Arkansas some better depth, right? Like, you're able to move Gackle back. Maybe he's the first guy out of the bullpen here today, and maybe, or today, this weekend, and maybe it's just that Gackle's more comfortable in a bullpen role. So it might not just be that you're deeper because you're adding a piece. You might also be better just because a rotation of Root and Wood and Vital Cheese with Gackle in the bullpen is a better combination. That could just be the case. So that's something to watch. And then speaking of the mound, interested in watching Ryan Prager for A&M here. Last weekend against South Carolina, A&M got the win, but Prager had a tough time with home runs. Like, he gave up a handful of home runs to South Carolina, which is not the biggest power hitting team, far from it, in the SEC. Arkansas does have the power bats. And so if he's homer prone as a pitcher, this is not really the offense you want to be coming up against. We'll see how that goes. I suspect he'll be better this weekend, a little bit sharper, but he has not been the same guy. The numbers have been good, but he's not necessarily been the same guy that we saw last year that was so consistent for A&M. Ole Miss and South Carolina. This is in Columbia, South Carolina. The Gamecocks continue to just take gut punches. I mean, it's just been tough. They continue to play relatively well in some respects. They continue to play hard. That the game, the opening game of the A&M series last weekend, they traded punches with A&M the entire time, and they just came up short. And then in the finale, they were on the verge of run ruling A&M, and they end up losing that game. So obviously that there are pitching issues, but generally speaking, they're playing pretty clean baseball, and they just haven't gotten the results, and that's tough. And that makes this a good rebound spot for Ole Miss. They played Tennessee close last weekend. I was impressed with Ole Miss last weekend, the way they played the Volunteers. This should be an opportunity for Ole Miss to get back on the horse for a series win here to keep the momentum going and continue their march toward playing some home baseball in June. Oklahoma at Mizzou. That'll be a series where I'm at. I'm currently recording from my parents' place here in Missouri, but driving over to Columbia this evening. I'll be there for tonight and tomorrow's games. Crossland tonight, Kyson tomorrow, Malachi in game 3 for Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma is a good match for this ballpark in Columbia Taylor Stadium. One is that the ballpark tends to play big, and the weather is supposed to be kind of dreary this weekend. A lot of rain in the area, so it's going to be some thick air, some heavy air. So I think Oklahoma being a athletic, action-oriented offense, I think bodes pretty well for them, because it might be a weekend where it's just tough to get the ball out of the ballpark. And then I think defensively it bodes well for them too, because it is a bigger outfield, but Oklahoma has good athletes, can cover a lot of ground, can make things happen defensively. So I do think this is a good matchup opportunity for Oklahoma here, in addition to the fact, of course, that Mizzou is just not very good. So there's that, but Mizzou, it goes without saying, is like, they're desperate to get that 0 off their record. And also, I think there is a weird pressure with teams playing Missouri this year at this point, like the last 5 weeks of the regular season, of you don't want to be the one that gives Mizzou their first win. And so if Mizzou hangs around, like I do think there will be a little bit of pressure there because you don't want to be the first team to lose to Missouri. So kind of an interesting dynamic there. We'll see if, if either of or if any of the games this week can get close, is Oklahoma kind of able to deal with that pressure of not wanting to have that distinction. Last year when I was at Mizzou last year, that was the weekend they swept Florida. I'm not suggesting I have anything to do with it, but Mizzou succeeded in the weekend I was there. So my apologies to the Sooners if Mizzou gets a win this weekend, because apparently that'll just be on me for having been there. 2 series that have Friday starts: Kentucky at Tennessee. Kentucky's been close all season. Somebody commented last weekend, and I'll take their word for it because it sure sounds right based on how they played, that Kentucky has led in every SEC game this season, and they are 6-9. So life is tough in the SEC. You're not going to get a lot of sympathy there, but man, they've been close in just about every game. The question is, if they're going to be competitive in this series in Knoxville, you got to keep Tennessee in the ballpark. That's just, that's just 101 basic stuff. You just got to keep them in the ballpark, and then you at least give yourself a puncher's chance. Tennessee, not unbeatable. I think we've learned that, but pretty close, especially if Doyle pitches as well as he did last weekend against Ole Miss. Obviously he had the whole former team dynamic last weekend against Ole Miss, and maybe that pushed him over pushed him a little bit further and made him better than he otherwise would. But obviously he's extremely good. If he pitches that well and it makes it to where Tennessee can save up just about all of its bullpen for the rest of the weekend, they're going to be really, really tough, and especially at home. They're just obviously they play so well at home. And then Florida and Mississippi State, another Friday start. This is low-key a massive series. If MSU wins the series, it's going to be sitting at 7-11 in the SEC, and they're right back in it. And don't look now, but they've got winnable series ahead. I don't have their schedule pulled up right in front of me, but they've got Missouri, they've got Kentucky at home. They've got Auburn, who's playing really well right now, but they're not like an unbeatable team, right? So there's an opportunity there for Mississippi State to get back in this thing. It felt like maybe they were dead a few weeks ago, but now suddenly they're back in the mix. And if they win this series, they'll really be back in the mix. Florida has a little more work to do because they're one game worse than Mississippi State is right now. They're 4-11 instead of 5-10. So if they win this series, both teams come out at 6-12 and feel like they still have work to do. But Florida has an SEC ERA of 8.12. Injuries obviously have been a part of that, but man, that's very un-Florida-like, and also not going to get it done. Meanwhile, Mississippi State's pitched pretty well. They're middle of the pack in SEC ERA, and for a pitching staff that outside of Pico Khan, we've had questions about for a lot of the season, I think that's pretty good. That's giving them a chance to win. So should be, maybe the most important series when it comes to postseason positioning on the schedule this weekend, because both those teams are pretty much in desperation mode. Those teams are just about out of rope. And so a huge one this weekend in Starkville. I'm sure that place will be electric this weekend for those games. Got a few comments here. Eric asks, I think if Florida gets to 13 SEC wins, I think that should get them into the NCAA tournament. Yeah, historically, yes. And I think this year, because you've added 2 SEC teams, we saw what happened in men's basketball where they got 14 teams in. I don't think baseball is getting 14 in. Obviously Missouri and South Carolina are out of the running at this point. Mathematically, I guess South Carolina could get back in, but I don't think anybody sees that happening. So that's 2 of your 16 right there. So every other team would have to get in to get to 14, and I just don't see it. But regardless, 13 wins is that'll get you in the conversation. And last year we saw there were 4 teams that finished with 13 regular season SEC wins. All 4 of them got in. Now some were no brainers, but LSU got to the tournament final, and so they were a no brainer at that point. But even the ones that didn't do well in Hoover last year got in. So yes, that is kind of the line. And if Florida gets there, I'm going to like their chances for sure. They also have representation on the committee, Scott Strickland on the committee. So that is a factor. Gig'em Bart says, Ryan Prager get right game loading. Yeah, they're going to need it for sure, Bart, just because Arkansas is dangerous and they're mad because they lost a series last weekend. And so Prager's got to keep the ball in the ballpark. But if you do that, I think you've got a real chance. Certainly he's good enough to stifle that offense. Garrett Douglas I know there's a lot of season left, but as of today, how many league wins do you think is needed to be a host and then a national seed? Host probably 16. You can do it with 15 if you get to, the final of Hoover, something like that. But I would say 16. That's pretty standard. National seed tends to be 18. Certainly 19 if you're a shoe in basically. But again, 17 if you win the tournament maybe. 18 you feel pretty good about. Now the RPI is also a factor, right? If you're 18 and 12 in the SEC, but your RPI is 20. We saw with Mississippi State last year, right? Like they were in that range and that didn't even host, right? So if that's probably not even a good example. So if you're 18 wins and your RPI is 10, you may not be a top 8. You'll host with that, but you're not guaranteed a top 8. So RPI is also a factor, especially when we're talking top 8s, because the difference between RPI of 2 and RPI of 8 is really not that much, but that's kind of the difference between being a shoe-in to be a top 8 and to be on that top 8 bubble. So that's a good question there. Kobe Walker asked, do you think Mississippi State can win against Florida? I absolutely do. Sure. I mean, with the way Florida is struggling on the mound, I think you've got advantages there. I think that the Mississippi State, especially at home, that lineup, I think can do some things against a really beat up, really struggling Florida pitching staff. And on the flip side, you can pitch this Florida lineup. Now, Bobby Boser is hotter than the sun right now. Had I think a 3 home run game in midweek, and obviously State's pitching is going to be better than what they saw in the midweek, but he is swinging it well now. And Colby Shelton's having a nice year, but it is a Florida lineup you can pitch to. There's some swing and miss there. Some of the guys that were hot early in the year have cooled off. The lineup has had its own set of injuries to deal with. So absolutely, I'd favor Mississippi State in the series. Florida can win it, sure. They're talented too, but I would favor Mississippi State here for sure. So, all right, folks, that is going to do it for this edition of Weekend Waypoints, production of SEC Extra, D1Baseball.com. Thanks to all you who showed up on a Thursday to join me, kind of out of the ordinary here with a Thursday start to Weekend Waypoints. But you'll get 4 episodes this weekend. We'll do it again tomorrow, Saturday, and Sunday to fully recap the SEC 4-day weekend here on Easter weekend. So enjoy the baseball today, everyone. I'll be in Columbia tonight for Oklahoma and Mizzou, so I'll have some updates there. I'll have some written word on it after the game. Looking forward to it. I will talk to you all again tomorrow morning. Take care.